All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. I'm Scott Horton. And our next guest is the great Adam Morrow. He's on the phone live from Cairo. And there's been a hell of a lot going on there. Welcome back, Adam. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you joining us today. It's ipsnews.net for Interpress Service. Click the Middle East section there. You'll find Adam Morrow right away. So the results are in, and I guess everybody already knew, but now it's official that the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, the second Muslim Brotherhood candidate after the first one was, unchosen somehow by the military, Morsi, I believe is his name, has become the new president of Egypt. So is everybody happy and they won their revolution? TV said that Tahrir Square was thrilled.
Yeah, people are very happy. People are very relieved. Even people who weren't Morsi supporters are very relieved also that this last week is finally over. This long week of uncertainty is finally over. There were a lot of fears. As you know, the presidential runoff was actually held on the 16th and the 17th. It was more than a week ago now, and we had to wait. We had to wait about 8 days for the results to finally be announced. And there were a lot of fears that it certainly looked for a period there. It looked like they were about to just simply steal the election and name Shafiq the president. In which case, people were really bracing for either for a wave of serious unrest or even possible violence, or even a wave of false flag operations that would then be blamed on the Brotherhood, and then would sort of plunge the country into this Algeria scenario that everybody was talking about. So people are extremely relieved here that it's finally been settled.
Mm-hmm. All right, now all the reports were that the military had gone ahead and canceled all the president's powers anyway.
Yeah.
So that it didn't even really matter. This guy's just as much of a figurehead as if he was in favor of the whole system as it already exists, like Mubarak was.
Sure. That being said, though, I mean, there's something to be said for the popular mandate that the Brotherhood won through elections, both the presidential elections and parliamentary elections late last year. So they do have a popular mandate to start working.
So when they disbanded the parliament, was that just temporary until we're done with the results of the election kind of thing, or they dissolved the parliament?
That's still up in the air. The Brotherhood themselves and many members of parliament are saying that are basically refusing it. I've heard statements from them saying, "Look, we'll hold parliamentary sessions in Tahrir Square if we have to." So and I also just heard that several legal appeals have been filed at different courts, challenging that dissolution of parliament, which itself was based on a decision by the High Constitutional Court here that found the regulations for last year's parliamentary elections to be unconstitutional. It was a matter of it had to do with the breakdown between seats reserved for individual candidacies and seats reserved for party affiliates. So it's a very technical thing, and I know it's been challenged. So the fate of Parliament, I think, is still sort of up in the air. That is true. Much more serious, though, was this constitutional addendum that the military council announced about a week ago, and that basically apparently strips the president of a lot of his prerogatives. It also takes the Parliament's right to choose members of a constitution drafting body and co-ops it to itself. So now not only have they sort of dissolved Parliament, but they've also assumed control of the constitution writing process. So I've heard it described lots of people describe it as nothing less than a soft coup. But how that's going to affect the new president immediately, we're gonna find out in the coming days. What the fate of the parliament will be, I imagine, will soon be determined. But I think there's going to be a lot of legal wrangling in the weeks ahead.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, so when I read that this guy Morsi is a graduate of USC and that he taught at the University of California at Northridge, or one of these, I'm getting that wrong. Wait a minute. CSUN professor, I don't know, whatever university that is. am I wrong to just leap to the conclusion that, oh, well, he's a CIA agent?
Yeah, I can't really say one way or the other. I do have to admit it is strange that a lot of these leading Islamist figures here do have these ties one way or the other to the U.S. If you remember, there was a Salafist candidate who was disqualified. I think it was in April. It was earlier this year. There was a big Salafist candidate who was disqualified from the presidential race because it was determined that his mother had U.S. citizenship, which is strange coming from these guys who really talk the talk against the U.S. and U.S. foreign policy and U.S. support of Israel and that sort of thing. I have to admit, it is an interesting fact. What it means, I can't say one way or the other. There's always been talk of CIA infiltration in the Muslim Brotherhood. I can't verify that one way or the other. But I think we'll certainly. I mean, the proof is going to be in the pudding in the coming months. I think one of the first real tests that we're going to see is the Rafah issue, which we talk about a lot. Is the Gaza border crossing issue, which I know he has said that one of his first acts would be to open the Rafah border. So now he will have a chance to put his money where his mouth is, and we'll see if they actually do that or if they hem and haw. But what's interesting in this case, though, and again, this is an important point. What makes it better? What makes a Morsi presidency better than a Shafiq presidency is, at the very least, even if you assume that the upper ranks, the upper echelons of the group are infiltrated somehow or co-opted or whatever, they still have a very broad base of popular supporters who definitely can't all be co-opted. I mean, that's a grassroots, a very authentic base of support that sincerely believes in these principles. And if the president or if the leader of the group does start to hem and haw and try to somehow get out of these promises that he's made, you're going to see pressure from the lower ranks, which is something you already saw in the days of the revolution and shortly afterwards, when the group leadership started to make decisions that many deemed questionable. You had the lower ranks or the youth groups associated with the Brotherhood started to defect, or at least threatened to defect, and I think large swaths of them actually left. So that is the difference between a brother. At least the Brotherhood president is going to come under extreme pressure from his rank and file, whereas a Shafiq presidency, I mean, would have been co-opted from top to bottom. If you see my point.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess it's within the realm of imagination that once the parliament and the presidency has been established and they have such a broad-based popular constituency that they have to represent, or, I don't know, lose out to who, it seems possible that they could ebb away at the power of the military and create a more civilianized economy and society there instead of having all the power in the council. Although
I think
that sure is a long way to it. I don't know how else to do it other than get in a war with them, which doesn't seem like it would work very well.
Well, they're very
military
pragmatic. I think we also mentioned that last time, the pragmatic nature of the Brotherhood. And they've done a lot of negotiating, and they've sort of played this delicate political dance with the military council here ever since the revolution. They've sort of gone back and forth. I'm sure it's involved lots of closed door, behind the scenes closed door meetings and that sort of thing, which led a lot of their critics on the left here to accuse them of selling out the revolution and, cooperating with the ruling council, with the ruling military council, to the detriment or at the expense of the revolution and the revolutionaries. And I think that's kind of a naive, sort of a naive way to look at it. I think, in fact, they're just being pragmatic, and I think they're looking at doing things in a much more gradual way.
Yeah. All right, wait, I'm sorry. Hold it right there, Adam. We'll be right back, everybody, with Adam Morrow from Interpress Service, IPSnews.net, live on the phone from Cairo after this. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with Adam Morrow. He's a reporter for Interpress Service, IPSnews.net. He's in Cairo, Egypt, and we're talking about the results of the election. Now, tell me real quick here, Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, has won the election. When does he actually become president? Has he already been sworn in, or how's that work?
This is another interesting thing. Exactly where he's going to be sworn in is another issue, because I think the Brotherhood wanted to wants him to be sworn in front of Parliament, which is dissolved, and I think the military council wants him to be sworn in front of this high constitutional court. And it's that same high constitutional court that was ultimately responsible for the dissolution of Parliament. So if he ends up being sworn in front of that high court, it's the same as if it's as if he was acknowledging or recognizing the validity of the court's order to dissolve Parliament. So I think that too is still up in the air. But he will be sworn in one way or the other. I think within a week.
Within a week, okay. Yeah, think, well, that'll be interesting to watch and see.
Timetable, that's the plan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I see what you mean about the symbolism there, about whether he goes along with that or not.
But you can see just how convoluted and how sort of confused, the entire political scene is here. Voting in a president whose powers are still undetermined because of the lack of a constitution. The fight over who is going to write that constitution, who has the authority to appoint the members of the body that will be mandated with drafting that constitution. Things are very, very much up in the air politically. But as I was saying earlier, I just wanted to say very quickly that I think the Brotherhood. I don't know how this is being covered in the Western media. I imagine there's probably a lot of scaremongering. Egypt falls to the Muslim Brotherhood and all this sort of thing. But I think something we were touching on earlier is just the very pragmatic nature of the Brotherhood and their very gradualist way of doing things. And they've come out several times. Morsi himself has come out and declared that there would be no radical changes to the way women are expected to dress or things about the selling of alcohol or these red button issues. Has sort of come out and said there wouldn't be any radical things like that. They've come out and said that the Camp David peace agreement will remain intact, for the time being. It may eventually, certain clauses of it may eventually be put before a popular referendum, but nothing really big is going to happen certainly in the near term future. They're not going to make any massive, insane policy decisions in the near term future. I don't think. Certainly when, like we said, his authority is still indeterminate. I think we're going to spend a considerable amount of time with still, focusing on domestic issues, domestic political issues before any major policy changes will be seen.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about both of those things, in fact, because I think as far as, the TV propaganda for the Rubes goes, the question is whether the new regime is going to be like the Taliban and throw adulterous women down the well and all this crazy stuff.
No.
Or act like our Saudi allies and cut thieves' hands off and that kind of thing.
Right.
But then in D.C., what they're worried about is that other thing, independence, and whether, Islamic extremism is going to mean an insistence that D.C. has to butt out at least most of the time. And that's probably what's got everybody in a panic there at, the State Department, at the Pentagon.
Right. That is what it boils down to. I mean, the 30 years of Mubarak, and I can't speak for before that, but probably the same. But certainly in the 30 years under Mubarak, Egypt, as far as I could tell, Egypt didn't have an independent foreign policy. And if the Morsi victory actually means that Egypt from now on will have an independent foreign policy, that is definitely something that has got to be freaking out Washington big time. Especially given the size of Egypt, its strategic importance, its location. It's got the Suez Canal, not to mention the very long border with Israel, which is probably the most important thing in Washington to the policymakers in Washington. That is a very good question. Will Egypt actually pursue an independent foreign policy from now on? I'm not an insider enough to be able to answer that question. I think we'll be able to see in the months ahead. Like I said,
one thing that's clear is that them being Muslimists, Islamists in whatever degree, in no way precludes the idea that the Americans would work with them just fine, or try to, as we see in Afghanistan of old, in Syria and Libya right now.
Right. Well, as an American, I say I don't think it should. It certainly shouldn't. If you're dealing with another democratically elected government, there's no reason why it should pose a problem.
Well, that is always the American government standard. Like they always said to the Israelis that you don't have to deal with Yasser Arafat. He's not the democratically elected leader of anything. And then they democratically elected Hamas, and then for some reason that didn't gain them any legitimacy.
Right. I know Hamas is certainly very happy about this win,
because they're just a break-off group of the Muslim Brotherhood in the first place, right? Or
yeah,
not?
yeah, they are a break-off group. It's very ambiguous exactly how those two groups were. I think from what I understand, they're entirely independent of one another. I mean, they're sort of under the same general umbrella, but from what I can understand, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt certainly is not telling the Hamas people what to do in the Gaza Strip or in Syria. But
at least they can predict warmer relations.
From what I can tell, they both do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so. As you mentioned already, they announced that, they don't expect any of their foreign policies to change anytime soon. If they change at all, it's not like they're going to become an aggressor against Israel, like in somebody's fears or something like that. I'm sure there are people freaking out right now in Israel, but really, if anything, what they're going to do is open up the border with Gaza and allow Gaza to be something other than a big prison. That's
hopefully,
like the most likely near-term effect of this, if anything is to change at all.
Right. Well, another knock-on effect of this will be that I don't think the Israelis will have as free a hand as they used to beat the crap out of the Gazans like they did in the 2009 calf-led operation. If you remember at the time, I mean, Egypt kept its border closed even when they were being, I think 1,500 of them were killed in that operation. It was just an incredible humanitarian disaster. And for the whole 21 days that it happened in, Egypt under Mubarak kept the border firmly shut to medical aid and to food and stuff. I mean, it was really, really bad. Something like that would absolutely never would never be allowed to happen. If a similar incident happened again, the pressure for Egypt to get directly involved would be much greater. So this is something. This is one thing I think like I said.
We hope that would deter the Israelis from doing something like that again, rather than just be a recipe for a big war coming soon.
Right. Exactly. I think it's a very strong deterrent.
Yeah. Well, definitely hope so. And yeah, I don't know too much about it, but I know that Robert Dreyfuss's book, Devil's Game, he talks all about how the CIA worked with the Muslim Brotherhood, how really the British did before that, and we kind of inherited the Muslim Brotherhood from them because they were an alternative to the nationalists, Nasserites, and also to all the socialists and communists as well, and so they supported right up through at least the 1980s. And I guess in the Balkans too, went align with the most right-wing Muslims around as best they could in pretty much every situation.
Right. I haven't read the book, and nor do I consider myself really an expert in the Muslim Brotherhood. But that being said, I do think there's a lot of propaganda going on. There's a lot of propaganda out there and it is possible that a book like that might be some kind of propaganda against them to paint them.
Well, I don't think so, but actually I don't mean to misparaphrase the book either, because I don't think he makes any claim that the Muslim Brotherhood works for the CIA right now. This is all historical work here.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
worth your read. I think you'll really like it, actually. I'd be interested to hear what you think of it.
I'll definitely look for it.
Yeah.
I would just be careful of a lot of the stuff you might find floating around in the mainstream media about the Muslim Brotherhood and this sort of thing. I'd just be wary. You know what I mean? Just double check its sources and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you just have to use your best judgment. In the case of Libya, there was one where they said, I think McClatchy newspaper said, hey, wow, our new man in Libya has been living just outside of Langley, Virginia for the past 20 years. So at that point, I think we can all be 100% confident he's just a CIA spy. This guy, well, he was living in California, over there near the Rand Corporation. Flip a coin. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, then you have the president of Afghanistan, Karzai, over there, who was a Unical executive for years.
Yeah, well, it was Khalilzad who chose him, but yeah, same difference. Yeah, in fact, Khalilzad was the guy that wrote the 1991 Defense Planning Guidance that Wolfowitz took the credit for. The big no more near peer competitor imperial plan.
So in your face.
Isn't that interesting? It's a very small world, that neocon world, it turns out. All in Jim Loeb.
I gotta say, though, there's nothing direct, nothing as direct as those two examples that we just gave, though, that you could get on the Muslim Brotherhood, at least as far as I know currently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I would doubt it. I think, and I didn't mean to make Bob Dreyfus's book sound that way either. I think, if I'm just guessing, the last documented friendship going on there would have been, back in the late 70s or something. Who knows? Maybe before then.
That being said, though, Scott, I'm not entirely dismissing it. I mean, people really, really have to watch. People really, really have to be worried because there are agents everywhere, especially in post-revolution Egypt. It's sort
of course. Hey, the Americans and the Saudis have a tremendous task of trying to undo and/or co-opt the Arab Spring in every place that they possibly can here. So, everybody watch your back. All right. Well, thank you. It's always great talking with you, Adam. I appreciate it, and I hope we can do it again soon as events develop over there.
Looking forward to the next time, and the way things are going here, I'm sure it won't be long before there's some new breaking development.
Yeah, well, you just keep writing, and I'll keep reading them.
Excellent.
All right, thanks again, everybody. That is Adam Morrow from Interpress Service, IPSnews.net, and we'll be right back.